I will carry the lanterns. We'll go out tonight. We'll go to the caverns. We'll go out tonight. We'll go to the caves. Kiss your mother good night and remember that God saves. Kiss your mother good night and remember that God saves.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Geezerology on YouTube and our June discussions of father-related songs for Father's Day month. We're going to start it off with a discussion about Violent Femmes with their second album and the lead track of that album, Country Death Song, and we'll go into that a little bit later. It's not your typical message that you usually hear around Father's Day, but we're still 2 weeks out, so we can play around with it a little bit. Okay, I'm Scott in South Florida. There's Bob in Western Missouri, and Dan has come back to join us. He's in Eastern Missouri in the St. Louis suburbs. And so Bob, what's in the news this week?
Well, I've got a little continuation of a theme that I got into in our previous discussion. And, you know, we've got supposedly the pandemic now maybe in our rearview mirror. And there's music news coming back and live shows are coming back. And I know here in Kansas City, they've announced that Garth Brooks is going to be coming to Arrowhead Stadium, which I'm sure is going to be a total sellout. And we have an outdoor amphitheater out at Bonner Springs, Kansas, and they've announced acts like Styx and ZZ Top and stuff like that. And then I saw a news article a couple of days ago that Grand Funk Railroad is going out on their some kind of wonderful tour this year. And I started thinking about this, and so I did a little looking into Grand Funk, and they're not a desert island band for me, but they're a fun thing to listen to from time to time. And I started thinking about, is it really Grand Funk Railroad without Mark Farner?
I was going to ask you that. I mean, are we talking about like Don Brewer and two other guys or something?
It's Don Brewer and Mel Schachter, two of the drummer.
Well, it's 67% of Grand Funk.
67%, right. And then three other guys. So it's a quintet now. But ironically, there's been a lot of legal stuff going on between those two and Mark Farner, you know, who was the front man for the band. And they actually sued him and got a restraining order prohibiting him from using the Grand Funk name. And the news article specifically that Farner had to agree that his first and last name would appear in capital letters before a reference to Grand Funk or Grand Funk Railroad, with only the first letters of the band capitalized and first letters of the word former, formerly, and member also capitalized.
Wow.
Yeah. So the guy that wrote 90% of their music, who was a charismatic frontman, who was known for, you know, his stage presence, his singing, his guitar work, can't use Grand Funk Railroad unless he has all of these other things around it. And then the Grand Funk that's touring under the name Grand Funk Railroad is essentially a cover band, if you get right down to it. And one of their tours is going to be at the Ameristar Casino here in Kansas City. And tickets start at $40 and then go up to $50. So I started thinking, would I pay $50 for a front row seat to see a Grand Funk cover band? No. Would I pay $50 to go see them with Mark Farner? I might consider it. And then that led me to think about, and I think this could be a philosophical discussion sometime down the road, you know, at when should a band stop trying to be a band if they've lost the wrong people? I mean, you know, you can't have Grand Funk without Mark Farner. You can't have the Doors without Jim Morrison.
Well, according to legal documents, you can have
Grand
Funk with Mark Farner,
you know.
and according to legal documents, you cannot have Grand Funk with Mark Farner.
Exactly.
That's the way it works.
Some of the shows, the Guess Who is on the bill with Grand Funk. So Guess Who has one original member, drummer Gary Peterson. And everybody else, Randy Bachman, Burton Cummings, all of those people are gone. So again, do you have Guess Who without Burton Cummings? No, you don't.
I mean, Bob, it's sort of interesting you brought up Grand Funk Railroad. That was the first big time rock concert I saw back. I was in high school, and I went with a very good friend of mine who Scott knows. I won't name because he'll probably be able to figure it out. And it was when Closer to Home was big on the charts, and they had some other big tunes, and we saw them at the Kiel Auditorium. But the band that stole the show was the opening act. And it was an act featuring Steve Marriott and Peter Frampton. It was, and now it eludes me now.
Humble Pie.
Thank you, Humble Pie.
We had our discussions about Humble Pie here on here on Geezerology on YouTube a couple of months ago. Yeah.
Okay, I'll nip it right there. But anyway,
no. That's
the guy next to me at the crowd after halfway through the Grand Funk said, he goes, "If you ask me, they're another Cream." I said, "Yeah, okay." But it was a rousing show and all that. But yeah, that's like Creedence Clearwater touring without John Fogerty. You can't separate the one.
Well, how many versions of the Temptations have been out there?
Well, yeah, because
the Four Tops and all those singing groups from those Motown singing groups from the 60s. It seems like they show up in casino theaters, and you go in there and you don't know who any of these guys are.
Yeah, I mean, all the original ones except one, they passed on. But
getting back to Grand Funk, Bob, you remember back when you and I went and saw a show? This would have been sometime in the 80s. I don't remember specifically, but it was in McDonald Arena in Springfield, and it was 3 or 4 buildings. I remember Iron Butterfly. Mm-hmm. I remember Mountain, who it was supposed to be 4 bands, and Mountain was supposed to be one of them, but Mountain didn't show.
Right.
But it was Iron Butterfly, and it was Savoy Brown, and the headliner was Mark Farner of Grand Funk. That's how he was billed. And so this thing was Grand Funk has been going back, 40, 50 years.
And it's interesting, and after they broke up, they've actually reunited about 3 times, so they get back together, they break up, get back together. And I guess they've been broken up for good since sometime in the 90s, but they have had a couple of reunions. No, I just and the bigger picture that I think actually could be an interesting discussion sometime is some bands are able to survive losing, the most important member. Like Genesis had a whole second career after losing Peter Gabriel, but they really reinvented themselves as a totally different band. AC/DC did it, but it's like, can you have Queen without Freddie Mercury? So I think there's an interesting.
Well, we do have Queen without Freddie Mercury.
I know, but is it really Queen?
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
it's a different Queen.
It's a different Queen,
but just like Genesis was a different Genesis,
Right, but you're going to have Grand Funk Railroad going out doing nothing but tunes that were created by Mark Farner, and so it's a cover band that's out there, and so anyway, I just thought it was kind of interesting. I don't know if there's a bigger point there or anything, but I just.
This has been going on for a long time. Remember, it happened with the Doors. They took on Scott Stapp, and John Densmore didn't like it, so they renamed themselves the Doors of the 21st Century. If you remember, it's not infrequent that this happens. It's just every once in a while with the big ones, it makes headlines sometimes for the more well-known bands.
So off the subject, Dan, since you mentioned Kiel Auditorium, I got to do my Kiel memory real quickly. We came up to St. Louis to see Foghat at Kiel Auditorium, and I drove, from my hometown of Poplar Bluffs. It was about an hour and a half trip, and I told everybody, hey, I'm staying straight, man, so I can get us back home. So made a vow that I wasn't going to do anything with herbs or anything. So I didn't smoke anything, didn't do anything. But I remember at intermission, when they flipped on the house lights, you couldn't see across the auditorium. The air was so blue.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So ultimate contact high. And I remember when we left, I somehow wound up going up an exit ramp onto I-55.
Whoa.
Yeah, yes, I got totally screwed up.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
I don't know how I did it, but somehow I did, and I realized my error and got turned around, and eventually got us home. But
Oh,
it was
God.
one of those things where God was watching over me that night.
Yeah, obviously that was.
So many shows at Kiel Auditorium in my day. In fact, I just mentioned one of them in the piece I just put on Geezerology.com. That was a show in late 1973 when I went with a buddy of mine who wanted to go see Wishbone Ash. So I went with him to see Wishbone Ash, and I got totally blown away by the open. I don't remember anything about the Wishbone Ash show, but I walked out of there. I was totally blown away by the opening act, who I'd never heard of before, and which was Renaissance. You can, and I just wrote a piece about Renaissance at Geezerology.com. So go check that out. Pretty interesting stuff.
I don't know who the opening act for Foghat was, so they must have been very memorable.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, most of the time you don't remember opening acts. Every now and then you do. That, yeah, Dee remembered the Grand Funk opening act. I remembered the Wishbone Ash opening act. There were a couple of those sprinkled through my concert going history, but there are many more who I have no clue who. I have no memory of who the opening act was. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Hallowed Ground by the Violent Femmes. This was the Violent Femmes' second album. It was recorded in January 1984. It was released that June. The background on this record, Gordon Gano, who was Violent Femmes was a acoustic trio who a lot of people in the day called them acoustic punk, because they were basically part of the new wave movement, that post-punk new wave movement that got pretty big, but they were strictly acoustic. Gordon Gano, who was the lead singer and the guitarist and the composer, songwriter, played acoustic guitar. Brian Ritchie played a acoustic bass guitar, and then they had a drummer who would stand up. He would have 2 or 3 snare drums and cymbals there, but he would use brushes and not drumsticks. So very understated. Anyway, they were pretty young. I just noticed that when the second album came out, Hallowed Ground, it was released in June 1984, which was Gordon Gano's 21st birthday when this was released. So they were just out of high school when they went pro. In fact, this was the second album on his 21st birthday. His first album he would have been 20 when that album was released. All these songs on the first 2 Violent Femmes albums were songs that Gano wrote when he was in high school. He wrote a bunch of songs that were more traditionally rock songs. He was also brought up in a Southern Baptist household in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he was pretty involved in a Southern Baptist church, and he wrote a lot of gospel songs, and a lot of country tinged gospel songs, and those are the albums. Those were the songs that ended up on the second album, Hallowed Ground, which, when it was released, was a pretty polarizing album. There were a lot of people were offended by it because they thought that these songs were fairly sacrilege when it was just the opposite. I mean, these were coming from from the heart of a guy who you know, he was, I mean, he lived this, he lived this stuff. But anyway, but it's certainly different than anything that we heard at the time. And this album was it's jarring. It's unique. There wasn't a whole lot like this album that happened before, and I don't know if there's been a whole lot like this album has happened since. I remember I didn't get onto it actually until a few years later when a coworker of mine played it for me. I said, "Oh, this is pretty good." So I listened to this record for a while. I haven't listened to many more Violent Femmes albums. I know a few of their hit singles that they had over the years. But anyway, we wanted to talk about this, and I brought it up rather ironically because when Bob and I were planning our June topics, we decided that we were going to try to get some topics related somehow to Father's Day. And my brain immediately went to that opening track, "Country Death Song," which is about a father who was having a rough time. It was actually written. It was based on an account that Gano read in a newspaper or magazine or something of this happening, and he wrote this song about it, of this father who was having a pretty tough time raising his family during some rough economic times, and so he decided that he couldn't take care of his family anymore, and he kind of his solution was a rather unconventional one. If you listen to the song, it's a very straight story. You understand what it is if you know the song. Okay, so I've told everybody about what this album is about. I believe Bob had told me before that he knew this album because we've actually briefly talked about this album in a previous conversation. But I believe that Dee is brand new to Hallowed Ground and probably brand new to the Violent Femmes also, right? Is this the first you've ever heard of the Violent Femmes?
Yeah, I've heard of the Violent Femmes, but I'd never really listened to their music. At that time, I was coming out of, I wasn't listening to much music at all, to tell you the truth. But I had heard of them, and I just thought, by their name, I thought, well, they're probably another, I don't know, like a Marilyn Manson on caffeine or something.
Oh yeah, I have no idea where that name came from, but that's a little weird.
Which belies the music. So, right. And I in full disclosure, I probably should have listened to the entire LP several times. I listened to the song that we're talking about a few times, and instrument-wise, I did like the arrangement because I liked how they used the xylophones in there, which you don't all. I thought they were kind of quirky, but enough to keep my attention.
Right.
And for the title song that you referenced, I thought you summarized it pretty well, and without getting too tick-tacky about it. His vocal, and first of all, he's very young, 21, which I have to hand it to him. It's a lot of talent to come to the fore that early. But his vocal reminded me a little bit of Lou Reed in certain passages, And of course, the song itself, it's I thought, okay, he's having a really bad day. I thought there were touches of maybe he was trying to personalize it or whatever, but it was sort of like Edgar Allan Poe, just sort of like a country, I don't know, a country feel to it. But it definitely is arresting when you get to the father's solution to his dilemma.
Yeah, he did get arrested. If you listen to the whole song, he did.
No, I meant the song was. I meant the song was arresting.
Let me just quickly go ahead. What the song is for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's about a father trying to raise his family, and he's trying to support his wife and I think two young daughters, I think, and he just gets really distraught because for whatever reason. He doesn't have any money and everything. So the song is a build up to the final act, which is he takes his daughter. Apparently, it's out in a farm or something, but he takes his daughter out to a well and he tells her how much he loves her and everything. He throws her down into the well, and then we don't. And then the next verse, after he throws her down to the well, he's really distraught, and he's really feeling horrible about this, as a father would, and then he goes back out. He goes out to the barn and he hangs himself, and that's the end of the song. It's a nice way to kick off a Father's Day discussion. But Dee, did you listen to any of the rest of the album, or did you just focus on that?
One of the one song I really like was "Gone Daddy Gone." It's got a nice chorus in it, and again the xylophone is in there.
Let me see a credit on that. See who's playing that xylophone. Hold on just a minute.
Which you don't hear xylophone too much, with the exception of a few.
Yeah, there are a lot of guest performers on here, including John Zorn playing on the song Black Girls. Xylophone, piano, organ, banjo, auto harp, sax, harmonica. What is our cornetto or a sack butt? There's somebody named Drake Scott who plays something called a cornetto and something called a sack butt. I have no idea what those are.
Well, I mean, unless they come close to the sounds of a xylophone.
Yeah, something. I'm not sure I don't see a xylophone in the credits here, so I'm not exactly sure how that's credited. But
yeah, "Gone Daddy Gone" is my favorite song on there. I mean, it's it's slightly askew, but I like the arrangement. I think the lyrics are slightly amusingly ironic. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of gospel, country gospel on here. Jesus Walking on the Water, which is actually one of my favorite tunes on here. Hallowed Ground, which is the title song. It's Gonna Rain is a nice gospel song as a closer. The one song on here is really weird and is really, really strange now. And I hadn't listened to this album in a while until we decided to talk about this. And I went back and revisited it a few times in the last couple of weeks. And the song that is really jarring now to 2021 ears. It was a little hinky back in the day, but it's really, but in 2021 now, it's really jarring. It's the song "Black Girls." I like the Black Girls. And yeah, I mean it definitely turns your head when you hear that now. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty consistently good album, and there are a lot of surprises here. First time, when you listen, there are a lot of surprises here, things that you don't expect to hear in a rock album, especially one by a fairly new band who at the time who was fairly young. I think the album's I think it was a pretty good accomplishment by this band, especially considering that these were just all things pulled out of this guy's notebook from when he was still in high school. You don't hear many high school kids writing songs like this. The first album was different because the first album was basically rock songs about him adolescent, like rock songs about him trying to get his dad to lend him the car so he can take his girlfriend out and feel her up, stuff like that. More conventional teenage hormonal songs in that first record. This went in the other side of his brain. What did you think of this, Bob?
Well, I like it, but I'm really confused by it. And I don't know whether to take it seriously or whether they're having a big joke on everybody. And the contradictions that are in it.
That was a controversy when it came out, and no, I mean it was the intent. It was a serious intention behind this. This was not intended to be ironic or to make light of things. Yeah.
Well, like the country death song. Okay. In the context of folk music, that's not really that much of a departure, because folk music for centuries was used to chronicle history and events, and it was almost the journalism of the time. Right. And a lot of the songs were about tragedies and things like the Tom Dooley, which was popularized by the Kingston Trio, was actually a song about a guy named Tom Dula who was accused of murdering his girlfriend. So, a lot of those folk songs have a history of covering topics like this. So when I listen to country death song, the first thing that pops into my mind is, okay, is Gano actually following in that folk tradition?
Yes.
Or is he mocking it? No. And then I got the same thing with Jesus Walks on the Water, deciding whether to take it serious. And Black Girls, not only was, the topic itself kind of questionable, but he goes from singing about go on, give it to me harder, to segueing into, I love the Lord of hosts, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. So in one sentence, you're singing about banging Black girls, and then you suddenly switch to praising the Lord. And I still kind of sit there and go, okay, are you serious about this? Are you having us on?
He's a teenage kid trying to I guess maybe you can look at it this way. He was a teenage kid trying to resolve his hormonal teenagedness with his at the time, apparently, it was a very sincere belief in the teachings of the Baptist Church.
Well, and that's why I still to this day struggle with how to reconcile the album, and do I take it seriously, or, were you a teenager who was having a joke on everybody? And I know their first album, they intentionally released that material, which was more pop oriented, because they were afraid that if they used this material as their debut, their careers would probably be shot.
Right. So, well, even after they had success with the first album, when Gano decided he wanted to put this stuff together in his album, his bandmates, Brian Ritchie, who's still with them, they're still recording to this day. The band has been around forever. Gano and Ritchie, and then the drummers come and go, kind of like the spinal tap syndrome. They go through drummers like Spinal Tap did. But anyway, when Gano wanted to record this stuff on a second album, Ritchie and Victor De Lorenzo, who was the drummer at the time, they didn't want to do it.
Yeah, well, they were actually atheists.
Yeah, they didn't want to do it. Yeah, because they were atheists, and they didn't believe this stuff, and they didn't want to record the stuff. But Gano and the record company and their management prevailed upon them to do it, and I don't. This isn't the album that made their career, but it's certainly. It certainly boosted their career, because I know I've seen a couple of shows. They're still they still perform 2 or 3 of these songs in their set list to this day.
Well, don't get me wrong. I like the music. I like the folk punk type stuff they do. The songs are well written and they're intriguing and everything. Just the first time I heard it, I really questioned. Whether this is a parody, are you making fun of this, or are you serious about it?
Yeah.
After learning a little bit more about their background,
Yeah.
I lean to more toward maybe you are serious, but it's still, there's still this lingering thing in the back of my mind that you're just making fun of this stuff. But it's I like it, I'm kind of surprised I do, because the folk punk thing is a little jarring and a little bit outside of my normal thing, but I like it. Like I say, this my biggest issue with it initially was whether they were being serious or whether it was just a big setup.
Yeah. When did you first hear this album?
I think I heard it the first time. Oh geez.
Like back when it was fairly fresh, or are we talking
so.
about
I think
a decade or so later? Yeah.
And then I kind of dismissed it because, like I say, I didn't know whether to take it seriously or not. And when I first stumbled across it, I know what it was. Yeah, I had just found new spiritual values. So I was a little skeptical of it. And, I've since segued back to the old me, so I can appreciate it more now than I did back then.
Yeah.
And then when after you mentioned it, and I went back and listened to it again for the first time for however many years, I was again immediately struck with my first impression of, I don't know whether to take you seriously on this or whether you're just doing this stuff as a parody. And I did not know that Country Death Song was actually based on an actual event. So that does change things. And, sadly, I know that we do have, in reality, parents who do kill their children. I know as a father of twin daughters, there were times that I was pushed to that thought, but I guess that was a bad joke. But I know that, people do get pushed to that point, sadly. Right. And knowing now that like I say, up to this minute, I did not know that it was based on an actual event. That does change my feeling about that song.
Right. It was an account he read. I mean, I don't know how much, how I don't know how accurate to the original story that the song is, but he wrote this after reading an account of this or story similar to this, and it was strictly his intention that he wanted to write he wanted to take that and make it into a traditional folk song. He wanted to, when he's a young kid learning how to write songs, and he's getting pretty prolific and pretty good at it. And that was his intention, to write it as a traditional Woody Guthrie style folk song.
It's probably the way it's delivered with if it was done in a more straightforward folk music fashion, you would probably take the song more seriously. But it's the way it's sung and the instrumentation behind it that kind of that's what kind of led me to think, is this a parody?
Oh, right. Well, yeah. I mean, you have to remember that the intention was to make a follow-up to basically a straight rock album, and in their unique style, and to carry on their unique style. And I think they did it. I think they were very successful at that. Well, I can see where this album, but I wasn't there contemporaneously. I wasn't there, so I missed when all this happened. I was, like I said, I got onto it about 3 or 4 years later, after everybody else had moved on from it. But I can see where this could be a pretty jarring thing for people in 1983.
Well, Black Girls is more jarring today than I think it was back in.
Well, yeah, that one is. That's what I was saying. That's really jarring to 2021 years.
Talk about cancel culture. I mean,
wow. Right.
But the one thing he does, he manages to offend both blacks and whites in that song. It's equal opportunity offending.
Right.
But I will add this, Scott. Only you would come up with Country Death Song as an homage to Father's Day.
I just, I don't know why. It was just when we were talking about let's do songs, or let's do songs about fathers, is the first thing that came into my mind.
I mean, a normal person would do Cats in the Cradle or Matthew and Son or something like that, but not you. You're still weird after all these decades.
Yeah, I'd like to show my twisted sense of humor now and then.
Yeah, your freak flag is still flying.
Yeah, but anyway, just to quickly put a cap on this. Violent Femmes have, like I say, Gano and Richie have continued this band through the years. It's basically them two, and then those two, and then whoever they feel like bringing in to help them out on whatever they're particularly doing. I know that sometimes they'll show up on stage as a 5-piece band or something, but yeah, they're still recording. They're still around. D, anything else to add?
Yeah, just one thing. I am going to check out some of their other LPs, because it's to me, their music is intriguing enough. It's worth a listen to check out. And I think they've got what, 9 or 10 LPs in the vault.
Yeah.
So and then it's interesting that they've still lasted, the 2 key members. If you look back at the the new wave punk thing, there's no one that survived that. I mean,
not many,
like
not many.
Ramones and Blondie and all those, but they've survived, and maybe because they didn't take that full frontal, more of a heavy rock, 3-minute song and 3 chords approach. But yeah, I'm going to check out some more of their music.
I'm looking at their discography. They've recorded 10 studio albums. The most recent one was last year, called Hotel Last Resort. It looks like, they were pretty quick right out of the gate. 83, 84, 86, 89. And then they slowed down a little bit. It looks like they released one about every 4 or 5 years, but bringing them right up to 2019. Hotel Last Resort. For a time, I think one of these albums, and was touring with them, the drummer was Brian Viglione, who was Amanda Palmer's partner in the Dresden Dolls. He played on at least one of these albums and toured with them for a little while. That's just of interest to me, because I was a Dresden Dolls fan. Yeah, still a going concern. He was 21 when that was released. He is now he's 57 now. He's still a young guy.
That's right. Well, if you figure that
he's still a kid. He's 57.
That's right. If you figure Keith Richards and Ringo Starr are going to be on the road this year.
That's right. He's got a lot of years ahead of him.
That's right.
I tell you, but Ringo was the youngest looking 80-year-old I've ever seen in my life.
I know.
And I guess Richie's probably about the same age. I think they were probably high school friends. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I got a couple things since we started out kind of reminiscing and going down memory lane. I got to do 2 things real quickly.
All right.
One is we were talking about Grand Funk. The first 3 albums that I ever bought was Grand Funk Live, Steppenwolf Live, and Arlo Guthrie's Alice's Restaurant. And I bought those 3 from a kid in high school. And I still have all 3 of them all these decades later. And then I got to do a shout out to Dan over there. One of the most memorable shows that I have ever been to in my life was thanks to that man. And I got to see a female trio in St. Louis called the M&M Girls.
The M&M Girls.
Trio of black female singers, and M&M stood for menopause and Medicare. And I still remember that show all of these decades later.
Yes.
I remember that. They were a local group, right, D?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
played.
I remember them. You may have even you may have taken me to one of their shows one time.
And
Well,
I remember that
Bob
now.
Bob came up, and I don't know if Sue was with you or not,
no,
but
that was just me. So
and
it
he
was just
came
you
up
and me.
to St. Louis. I thought I got to show him something that's a little bit different, and and they played most weekends at Frank Moscas in Exile.
Yeah.
It was him and his wife that owned it, and his wife would part-time belly dance, from table to table. But the M&M girls were they would perform vaudeville type songs, body stuff from the 30s, 20s and 30s, and the lead singer, who was Rockhouse Annie, who she would walk around. One of the songs they did, I think it was 8 inches, and she'd walk around with a ruler. Who's the man with the 8 inches?
And I remember another song they had was "A Hard Man Is Good to Find." Yeah, and she was a blues singer back in the
Yes.
30s on the riverboats, in the Mississippi.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that was one of the more memorable nights of my life. I got to sit in a courtyard with a belly dancer and then see 3 body black women do these songs. That was one of the most memorable nights I've ever had, Dan, and I want to thank you for it.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, but I was just trying to offer you something a little, off the path a little bit.
It was, and I remember you dragged me to places in St. Louis that I never knew existed.
Oh, well, yes, that's what I was good for back then. I could take you to some questionable dens of music. And
It reminded me of a short story that I had read. Oh my God, I can't remember who the author was, but the title was "Only the Dead Can Know Brooklyn," and I think the plot of it was some guy running into a person who, has just got this incredible knowledge about Brooklyn. It turns out that he's a ghost, and he knows it so well because he spent, all this time wandering around as a ghost. So that was like, so are you a ghost, Dan? How well you knew the back streets of St. Louis?
well, I spent a lot of time there and worked in St. Louis, and you get to know the little corner dens and all that. But yeah, Frank Moscas was a guy who had a place on the riverfront, and then somehow he lost his license, so he ended up there it was in South St. Louis on Gravois, and then he called himself Frank Moscas in Exile, and his wife Jan Mahana, the belly dancer. So anyway, that was
My. Okay, well, maybe we'll have a discussion about them. Let's see if we can find a video of them. I'm sure maybe a video exists somewhere on YouTube.
Maybe. I think the only other what possibly could be a more memorable night was you and me going to a male strip club, Scott.
Oh, that was in Oklahoma. I remember
was in
that.
Oklahoma City.
Yeah, in Oklahoma City. Yep. Okay, yeah, that's a discussion for another time.
Or maybe never to discuss.
That's not on the turntable.
Right. That was, it's not on my calendar, but maybe later we'll put it on my calendar. Okay, well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks, Dee. It was nice to have you again. Next week we're going to continue our discussion of father-inspired tunes with a choice from Bob. I think a tune or a couple of tunes off of Bruce Springsteen's "Darkness on the Edge of Town." That's what we're going to talk about next week. So I have some homework ahead of me. I'm going to have to listen to the Bruce Springsteen album a few times so I can come back and know what I'm talking about next week.
Well, Scott,
I'm looking forward to it.
I listened to Lou Reed. You can do.
I'm looking forward to it. I need an excuse to listen to Bruce Springsteen. This is a perfect excuse to do it. So I'll take the opportunity with a smile on my face. And Dee, join us if you can.
Well, I'll
and
send up a flare if I can't make it.
Same time, same YouTube channel, Geezerology on YouTube. Check us out at geezerology.com. I got a couple new pieces up this week and hopefully 1 or 2 more next week. I'm kicking around a couple things. And thanks, everybody. We'll go out with a clip of Violent Femmes playing "It's Gonna Rain" in a radio concert that they did about a year ago. So enjoy that. Thanks, everybody.
All right, take care.
Oh.